then we will have one more segment here for our HiveScience news. This one is a really fun topic I just found out about this morning, and this is going to be our little environmental segment talking about leeches of all things. Leeches expose wildlife's whereabouts and may aid conservation efforts. DNA extracted from parasitic worms, blood meal lets scientists track where the animals roam. Ecologists are using bloodthirsty leeches to evaluate the success of wildlife conservation efforts in China. Leeches suck. Most people try to avoid them. But in the summer of 2016, park rangers in China's Aleutian Nature Reserve went hunting for little blood gluttons. For months, the rangers searched through the reserve's evergreen forest, gathering tens of thousands of leeches by hand and sometimes plucking the slimy parasites off of the ranger's own skin. Each time the rangers found a leech, they would place it into a little preservative-filled tube, tuck the tube into the hip pack, and carry on. The work could help aid conservation efforts at Aleutian and elsewhere. There are many ways to measure how much effort goes into wildlife conservation, but it is difficult to assess the success of that effort, even in protected areas, said Douglas Yu, an ecologist at Kunming Institute of Zoology in China. But bloodthirsty worms may be the tool for the job. Leeches aren't picky eaters. They'll feast on the blood of many different creatures, from amphibians to mammals to fish. Scientists have shown that they can extract animal DNA from blood that leeches and other blood-sucking creatures have ingested. What's known as invertebrate-derived DNA, or iDNA, and identifies the source animal. And some researchers had suggested that iDNA, a type of environmental DNA, could be used to trace the ranges of animals in the area. Yu says, "We thought we would just actually try to do it." Enlisting 163 park rangers, Yu and colleagues deputized the leech hunters with gathering the parasites along rangers' regular patrol routes, which covered 172 acres of the reserve. 3 months later, the rangers had gathered 30,468 leeches. After extracting and analyzing animal DNA from the leech's blood meal, Yu and colleagues detected the presence of 86 different species, including the Asiatic black bear, domestic cattle, endangered Yunnan spiny frog, and of course humans. What's more, the iDNA gave clues to where the animals preferred to roam. The researchers reported March 23rd in Nature Communication, wildlife biodiversity was greatest in the reserve's high-altitude interior. The researchers found while domestic cattle, sheep, and goats were more abundant in the reserve's lower and more accessible zones, because most of the wild species detected should be able to inhabit all parts of the reserve. The dichotomy suggests that human activity may be pushing wildlife away from certain areas, Yu says. Compared with other methods of surveying wildlife, using iDNA from leeches is really cost and time efficient and doesn't require a lot of expertise, says Arthur Kocher, an ecologist at the Max Planck Institute for Science and Human History in Jena, Germany, or Jena, I guess it would be, right? Germany, who was not involved in the study. Camera traps, for instance, are triggered only by animals of a large enough size, and the instruments are expensive. Site-based surveys require trained observers. With leeches, Kocher says, there are clear advantages. You and Coker both suspect the leeches and other blood-sucking critters, such as carrion flies or mosquitoes, will become more popular wildlife surveillance tools in the future. People are becoming aware of what iDNA brings to the table, Yu says. I am super stoked about iDNA. I am absolutely ecstatic about using that in the future to help us identify populations of organisms in an area. But that was HiveScience news today. We did the iDNA, and I think it's a very interesting factor that will come into play multiple times in the future, and I'm excited to see what other endangered species we are able to track and help support and provide proper environments for based on the research being done here. Really cool stuff. But thank you so much for stopping by the Hive and spending a couple hours hanging out with me as we explored the world of science. We